Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 195 of the podcast. And in this episode of the podcast, I will be talking about shooting guard Demar Derozan's career resurgence with the Chicago Bulls. Derozan is having a career best season as a member of the Bulls. But before I talk about his current status in the league, let's look back upon his career. Demar Derozan spent his first 9 seasons with the Toronto Raptors and made the postseason 5 seasons in a row. From 2013 to 2018, he was arguably the best player in franchise history. Derozan made 4 trips to the All-Star game. He was All-NBA second team in 2018 and an All-NBA third team in 2017, and he was one of the most beloved players in franchise history. And unlike some of the past Raptor stars like Vince Carter and Chris Bosh, Derozan was committed to stay with the franchise. Derozan signed a 5-year, $139 million deal in 2016. He didn't demand a trade like Vince Carter or leave in free agency like Chris Bosh. Then into the 2018 offseason, everything changed for Derozan as he was traded to the San Antonio Spurs for Kawhi Leonard in a deal that ended up with the Raptors winning their first championship. This trade is now thought of as one of the best trades in NBA history by Raptors general manager Masai Ujiri. He traded DeMar Derozan, and even though Kawhi Leonard only lasted 1 season with the Toronto Raptors, the team ended up winning a championship. That's what the trade was for. That's what went down, and it all worked out for everyone, except for DeMar Derozan, who was left with a mediocre Spurs team that only made the postseason 1 time in his 3 years with the team. And while Derozan was still putting up decent numbers, he was largely a forgotten NBA star. Yes, he was coached by one of the all-time greats in Greg Popovich, but the Spurs are not that team that won 5 titles anymore. They're not bad, they're just mediocre and in the middle of a rebuild. And you could imagine Derozan watching this all go down, watching the team he stayed loyal to win an NBA title without him. That must have been maddening, and he probably wanted to prove the Raptors and the entire NBA wrong, and now it looks like he's doing that. Derozan, at 32 years old, in his first year with the Chicago Bulls, is having his best season ever. The shooting guard is averaging over 28 points per game, a career high, and 4th highest in the NBA behind only Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, and LeBron James. Currently, the Bulls have the 2nd best record in the Eastern Conference. Derozan has been named an All-Star for the first time since 2018. It's the 3rd time in his career he's been an All-Star starter. And Derozan is not just an All-Star. For the first time in his career, I look at him as a legitimate MVP candidate. He's currently on an incredible run with 7 straight games where he scored 35 points or more and shot at least 50% from the field. And by doing so, he's broken an NBA record that was held by the one and only Wilt Chamberlain for over 50 seasons. And he's the only other Chicago Bull not named Michael Jordan to score 35 in at least 5 straight games. Jordan achieved the feat 6 times in his career. The most 35-point games in a row for Jordan was 10 back in 1986. Derozan has also scored the most points in the 4th quarter this season with 434 points. Derozan is getting the job done in ways that I did not think was possible. The way I viewed Derozan's late-stage NBA career is I thought he was just a guy who could put up buckets. I did not think he could be the best player on a team that's winning big basketball games, but he is proving me and the rest of the league wrong. I thought Chicago was making a really bad mistake by giving him 3 years and $82 million. Again, I didn't question whether or not he can still score. I just no longer viewed him as an elite player, and I was really wrong. The most surprising thing about Derozan is how he's dominating in today's NBA in an era dominated by 3-point shooting. Steph Curry's and Klay Thompson's are dominating. They're winning championships, while Derozan himself is a career 28% 3-point shooter. He dominates with his lethal mid-range game. He's an old school scorer, like he'll still attack the basket, and again, he'll use his mid-range game, and by the end of the game, he'll have 35 points. He's one of the most unusual stars because there aren't a lot of guys like him. The NBA used to be dominated by guys like DeMar Derozan. Now he's kind of one of a kind. He's also just super secure in what he is. Like a lot of players nowadays, if they struggle with the 3-point shot, they learn it. I'm sure DeMar Derozan could get up there to like a 34% three-point shooter if he wanted to, but he knows he shouldn't be a stretch wing. The way that he can dominate in today's NBA is through the mid-range game, and he's having quite a lot of success doing it. So far, Demar Derozan is having a picture-perfect season. He's having the best year of his career, but there is one thing that is still a big question mark when it comes to Demar Derozan is how is he going to play in the postseason? Because the elephant in the room is the reason that the Raptors moved on from him is because he has struggled mightily in the NBA postseason. His career shooting percentage in the playoffs is 41%. DeRozan also has the lowest career plus minus in playoff history for any player who plays 30 plus minutes at minus 308 in 58 postseason games. If he leads this decent Bulls team to the Eastern Conference Finals, he would again prove a lot of people wrong, and that seems to be his mission this season. I remember for years and years and years, we never took the Toronto Raptors seriously because their two best players were Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, two of the worst NBA performers when it comes to the NBA postseason. Now, they are all-star players. Kyle Lowry was able to turn that story around by producing in the postseason. Now we look at Kyle Lowry as a clutch player. He won his title with the Raptors. This is DeMar DeRozan's best chance at playoff redemption. Again, he's proving to myself and a lot of people that he has a lot left in the tank when it comes to his career and being an elite player, but for him to change my entire viewpoint on him as a player, he needs to dominate this postseason, and there are a lot of great players who don't have rings and they weren't very good in the postseason. Tracy McGrady comes to mind. Vince Carter never won an NBA championship. But the big difference here is those players didn't struggle that badly as DeRozan has in the postseason. I mean, the Raptors moved on from him. They said, we cannot win a title with you as our best player. We can win one with Kawhi Leonard, and they proved to be right. Now DeRozan has to prove us wrong. And I'm not saying that this Chicago Bulls team needs to win the NBA Finals for DeRozan and the Bulls to prove us wrong. If he gets this team to the Eastern Conference Finals and he plays really well in the postseason, I think he will have proven us all wrong that DeRozan can be the best player on a really good basketball team. And listen, he can be the best player on a really good basketball team, but can he do well in the postseason? That is the biggest question mark when it comes to DeMar DeRozan. It's the defining thing about his career. We've never questioned whether or not he can put up really good regular season numbers. The big question is, can I win an NBA title or be on a team that is a legitimate contender with DeMar DeRozan being one of my best players? That question is still up in the air, and if DeRozan has this magnificent regular season and then the Bulls are bounced in the first round, my opinion on him is not going to change forever. If he's going to change my opinion on his career, then he needs to ball out in the NBA postseason. It is defining. It can change how we perceive players. He needs to change the narrative that he's only a decent scorer who can't show out in the postseason. He needs to have a big NBA postseason, and I guarantee that he knows he needs to show up this postseason for the Chicago Bulls. The Bulls are the second seed in the Eastern Conference, and if they're going to be any good this postseason, they're going to need DeMar DeRozan. And again, this Bulls team is really solid. They have Zach LaVine, they have Nikola Vucevic, and they have Lonzo Ball. And I think one of the most surprising things about the team is DeRozan has far and away been their best player this season, but really it maybe shouldn't have been that big of a surprise at all. Again, he's the only one of their core players that has played on winning teams. He's played in the Eastern Conference Finals. Vucevic and LaVine have put up stats, but they've never been on good teams until now. And DeRozan is one of the biggest reasons why the Bulls are where they are. This is a Bulls team that has missed the postseason each of the last 4 years, and right now they have the second best record in the entire conference. That's impressive to say the least. The team won only 31 wins last year and already have 38 victories at the All-Star break. DeRozan is one of the best storylines in the NBA right now. Again, look back at his history. He was a very rare type of NBA player in the modern NBA. He didn't want out of Toronto. Think about all the superstar players who are on the move from smaller markets. James Harden wanting out of Oklahoma City, James Harden wanting out of Houston, Now James Harden wanting out of Brooklyn, which is a good situation. DeMar DeRozan is a very different type of NBA star, and really, he was a victim of what the modern NBA is today. The only reason he ended up on the San Antonio Spurs is because Kawhi Leonard, somebody who won a championship with the Spurs, wanted out of his situation. And I'll say this, you can look at that trade and say the Toronto Raptors did exactly what they're supposed to do. They went and got Kawhi Leonard and they won an NBA championship. They did right by the organization, but you can still look at that and say, wow, I feel really bad for DeMar DeRozan. Again, he was loyal to that franchise, a franchise that couldn't keep a star player. Chris Bosh left that organization to go play with LeBron James and Dwayne Wade. Vince Carter left that organization to play with Jason Kidd and to play with Richard Jefferson, to play on a superstar team, to play on a super team. And guess what? DeMar DeRozan was having none of it. He didn't want to play with the other great NBA players. He wanted to be a member of the Toronto Raptors. He didn't change his viewpoint like Kevin Durant, who wanted to be an Oklahoma City Thunder, but then wanted to be a Golden State Warrior. No, DeMar DeRozan was committed to winning with the Toronto Raptors. Another impressive thing about DeMar DeRozan is how he took the trade. There are a lot of NBA stars who, after being traded, would continue to destroy the organization that traded them to the media. DeRozan has spoken no ill will towards the Raptors. He's taken the trade, he's moved on, and he's continued to be a solid NBA player, and now he's having a moment, and I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people, including myself, are rooting for him. He is acting how I want a modern NBA star to act. It's always interesting how we view someone like DeRozan, who has put up some really good stats, but has just not come up big in the postseason, and he hasn't won an NBA title. You can still be considered one of the best NBA players ever without winning a ring. Just see Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, the list goes on and on. But when we talk about those players, we always do bring up the fact that they have not won an NBA championship. But what we kind of fail to talk about is the fact that those players played in the era of Michael Jordan dominating the league, going to the NBA Finals, winning 6 times. And for DeRozan, he has played in an NBA that has been dominated by other star players who are just, I'll say it, better than him. LeBron James is just way better than DeMar DeRozan. I know DeMar DeRozan has not played well in the postseason, but there has never been a year in DeRozan's career where I said he should have won an NBA championship. The same with Steph Curry and the Warriors. DeRozan has been a part of that NBA that has been dominated by LeBron James and Steph Curry. And then you have the guy he got traded for, Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard is a great two-way player. DeMar DeRozan is a really good player. He's a great scorer. DeMar DeRozan is not an elite two-way player. In the same way we look at the 90s, we can look at this era and we can see a list of really great players who have not yet won a championship. You have Dame Lillard on the Portland Trail Blazers, the little engines that could. They've been to the Western Conference Finals with Dame Lillard. They have not come close to winning because, again, they're playing in that era of Steph Curry and LeBron James. Then you have Chris Paul. Chris Paul is an interesting one. He is one of the best point guards of all time. The only thing that Chris Paul does not have is an NBA championship. But you know who also doesn't have an NBA championship? John Stockton. You can still be thought of as one of the best players at your position ever without winning an NBA championship. And I think DeMar DeRozan, for his era, is one of the best shooting guards. And when you look at DeRozan's career, you also have to look at the fact that he has never been on an NBA roster where he was not supposed to be the best player on that roster. Klay Thompson is an excellent player. Klay Thompson has always played with Steph Curry and Draymond Green. DeMar DeRozan has never been given that kind of talent around him. He had Kyle Lowry, another guy who struggled mightily in the postseason. He never played with other great NBA players the way that other stars have. He has never played on a super team. You can look back at this past offseason and say the Lakers should have brought in DeMar DeRozan instead of Russell Westbrook. Again, and then if that were happened, you would have had LeBron James, DeMar DeRozan, and Anthony Davis, and they would have been legitimate title contenders. I don't know if it's in DeMar DeRozan's nature to be the third star on a super team, but he definitely could win an NBA championship as the third best player on a team. I just think no one thinks that DeMar DeRozan should win a ring as the best player on a team. But look at the stats. He's on pace to be a Hall of Fame caliber type player. DeMar DeRozan is going to end his career with more than 20,000 career points without a decent free-point shot in an era that's dominated by the free. He has an impressive resume. Again, he's a three-time All-Star starter. And even though he hasn't won an NBA Finals, he has gone to the Eastern Conference Finals with the Toronto Raptors, not one of the NBA powerhouse franchises. One of the biggest reasons I'm loving this moment that DeMar DeRozan is having is because I don't want him to be solely remembered as the guy who was traded for Kawhi Leonard. Again, I would have made that trade a million times over, but DeRozan himself did not get a fair shake in that trade, and he should not be remembered as a loser and the guy that was traded for Kawhi Leonard. Yes, that trade worked out, and Kawhi Leonard is a once-in-a-generational talent who helped the Toronto Raptors win their only NBA franchise. But I do think we should look back at DeRozan's loyalty to the Raptors fondly. He was trying to be something different in a completely different modern NBA. Loyalty no longer matters, but it should still be respected. And for that, I really do respect DeRozan. And again, he's having his best season, 28 points per game at 32 years old. He's been averaging about 21 the last couple of years with the Spurs. He has upped his game. He is showing the entire world that he still has a lot left in the tank. And again, I would love to see him have success in the postseason because he has been putrid in the playoffs. The worst case scenario is this, that DeRozan has this fantastic regular season. He's an MVP candidate. Then the Bulls make the postseason and they get bounced out in the first round. I am wishing, hoping that DeRozan balls out this NBA postseason and that the Bulls end up in the Eastern Conference Finals. A Bulls Heat matchup would be pretty good. A Bulls 76ers matchup would be decent. A Bulls Bucks, heck, Bulls Celtics, I would love to see it. I am a fan of DeMar DeRozan and I want him to keep proving everyone wrong because he kind of has been over the last few years the forgotten NBA star. And again, he is best remembered at this moment as the guy who was traded for Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors winning the championship without him. I want more for DeMar DeRozan, and I think we should all want more for DeMar DeRozan. He's one of the more exciting players to watch in the NBA. He is one of the best scorers of this generation. The one thing he is not is a winner, and I would love for him to be one. Nothing is better than an athlete proving us all wrong. It's like Andrew Wiggins with the Warriors. We had all given up on Andrew Wiggins. We thought he was a bust. Now he's an NBA All-Star starter. DeRozan, we all thought his career was over. We all thought at 32 years old he was just a scorer who couldn't win big basketball games. Now he's on the team with the second best record in the Eastern Conference, and he's one of the best storylines in the NBA. That's why sports is so amazing, because people can prove us wrong, and DeMar DeRozan is proving all of us wrong, and I hope he continues to do so. And I'll end with this. If the Bulls end up with the best record in the Eastern Conference, you have to give the MVP to DeMar DeRozan, because right now the Bulls are playing without Lonzo Ball and without Zach LaVine, and DeMar DeRozan is carrying them to the second seed. But if they finish with the first seed, you have to give him the MVP trophy, because where would the Bulls be without DeMar DeRozan? They would be bad. That's where they would be. And if he doesn't end up getting that, at least make him an All-NBA player. DeMar DeRozan is having the best year of his career at 32 years old. And he's doing it on a team that nobody expected to be this good. Again, that's another thing I love about DeRozan. When he's had success, it's been unexpected with the Toronto Raptors and now the Chicago Bulls, a team that has been really bad since the Michael Jordan era. Yeah, you had the Derrick Rose era. That didn't last very long, but now you have the DeMar DeRozan era, which is starting out way better than I expected. Again, when they gave DeMar DeRozan 3 years and $82 million, my first thought was he was overpaid. Now I regret making that statement. I am loving everything that I am seeing with DeMar DeRozan and the Chicago Bulls, and I really hope that team ends up having postseason success, because I think DeMar DeRozan has earned it. I mean, so far, DeRozan to the Bulls kind of reminds me of when Jimmy Butler went to the Miami Heat. I never expected that marriage to work out so well, but it has, and DeRozan with the Chicago Bulls seems like a match made in heaven. I really hope this team wins a playoff round or two. I really love having DeMar DeRozan back in the spotlight where he belongs. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday, so please rate, review, and subscribe.